Barrack 5, summer 1947. 6 months without a proper bath. The announcement came like a miracle. Showers for Barrack 5, 1 minute per prisoner. No exceptions. For Elara, a former nurse, the news was more precious than food. The constant itch, the smell of stale clothes, the gritty feeling on her skin, it had become a torment. She spent weeks hoarding a tiny piece of coarse soap, guarding it fiercely. This was not just about cleanliness, it was about regaining a shred of dignity, a connection to the person she used to be. The showers were a makeshift affair, a shed with concrete floors, thin partitions that offered little privacy, and a single communal cold water tap for each row of women. Outside, Sergeant Miller, a stern American guard with a weathered face, kept watch, stopwatch in hand. His gaze swept over the women, ensuring no one lingered. For him it was a logistical challenge, not a moment of human vulnerability. Elara's turn came. Her heart raced with anticipation. She stepped into the cold stall, trembling. The air was thick with steam and the scent of cheap soap. She placed her precious sliver of soap on the rough concrete ledge. She took a deep breath, and with a mix of fear and desperate hope, she turned the tap. A sudden exhilarating gush of icy water blasted over her. It was glorious despite the cold. She scrubbed furiously, trying to make up for 6 months of grime in 60 seconds. The rough soap formed a meager lather, but it felt like silk. She ran her hands through her matted hair, feeling the knots begin to loosen. The water washed away not just the dirt, but the layers of humiliation and despair. For this 1 minute, she wasn't a prisoner. She was simply a woman cleansing herself. 15 seconds remaining. Miller's voice boomed. Elara panicked. So much left to wash. So little time. She reached for her cherished soap, dropped it, and it slid under the thin partition. She frantically bent down, desperately trying to retrieve it. She straightened up just as the water began to sputter, then slow to a trickle. "No," she whispered, her heart sinking. She turned the tap again, but it was useless. The water stopped completely. She was covered in soap, shivering in the cold. Her hair was still thick with grime, her body sticky with half-rinsed lather. Her dignity, so briefly reclaimed, was shattered again. She peered through the thin partition, her voice barely a whisper. "Sergeant Miller?" Her throat was dry. "Water. More water, please." It was the ultimate humiliation, begging a guard, an enemy, for the most basic human need, half-naked and vulnerable. Sergeant Miller sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't look at Elara through the crack. He looked at his stopwatch. "Time's up, prisoner," he said flatly. 1 minute per person. The whole camp needs water. You know the rules. He kept his voice deliberately hard, adhering to the protocol. He ignored the image of the shivering, soapy woman behind the flimsy wooden wall. His duty was to prevent chaos, not to provide luxury. "But the soap," Elara pleaded, her voice rising in panic. "It's in my eyes. It burns." She pressed her hands against the partition, leaving streaks of thick white lather on the wood. The harsh military-issue soap was irritating her skin and stinging her eyes, blurring her vision. She realized the terrible absurdity. She was cleaner than she had been in months, yet she was in more physical pain and humiliation than before. Miller's resolve wavered. He had been in combat. He could withstand a direct threat. But the sound of a woman crying for basic hygiene broke through his defenses. He moved away from the door, pretending to check the heavy main pipes leading into the shed. He crouched down, fiddling with the large, greasy wheel valve controlling the water supply, a silent act of defiance against his own order. He wasn't turning the water back on, but he wasn't leaving her to suffer either. "Sergeant Miller?" The voice was a sharp knife. Major Dietrich, the camp commander, a man known for his icy adherence to regulation, stood at the entrance of the shower area. He wore polished boots that crunched on the gravel. He saw the empty trucks and the disorganized line of waiting women. "What is the delay, Sergeant? Time is money, and water is rationed. Is there a problem here?" The tension immediately returned, doubled by the commander's presence. Miller snapped to attention. "No problem, sir," he lied smoothly. "Just checking a minor pressure leak on the main valve." He knew if Dietrich entered the shed, and saw Elara covered in soap and misery, he would face immediate disciplinary action for incompetence and wasting resources. Dietrich's gaze swept over the women's barracks, then finally landed on the shed. "See to it, Miller, quickly, and keep the prisoners moving." Miller waited until Dietrich turned his back. He didn't dare turn on the water. Instead, he dropped his voice to a low, urgent whisper aimed at the partition. "Listen to me. The Major is here. Be silent. Don't move. You are already done with your shower. Understand? Don't say a word." He was ordering her to accept her humiliation, but by whispering the command, he was also offering her a strange form of protection, protecting her from the Major's punitive eye and protecting himself from the consequences of his wavering conscience. Dietrich's polished boots crunched away on the gravel. Miller sighed, the tension draining out of his shoulders. He glanced into the stall. Elara was still standing rigid, covered in soap, trembling now not just from cold, but from sheer emotional exhaustion. He knew he couldn't restart the main pump just for her. The risk was too great. Instead, he grabbed a small dirty bucket from the corner of the shed, the kind used for scrubbing floors. He quickly filled it with the last remaining trickle of frigid pipe water. He pushed the bucket to the stall entrance. "That's it," he muttered, looking away. "That's all the time and water I can risk. You wash off the soap and you get dressed. Now." It was cold water, barely enough to rinse her hair, and it felt like charity. Elara looked at the bucket, then at her soap-crusted arms. She realized she had asked an impossible thing from him, and he had given her the meager best he could offer. Her dignity demanded a choice: stay and suffer the burning, or leave and face the world half clean. She poured the frigid water over her head. It washed away the worst of the soap, but left her skin sticky, and her hair matted, dripping with cold grime. Accepting the failure, she pulled on her thin, damp undergarments. She pushed the partition open, stepping out of the steam and into the cold, harsh light of the shed. She was covered in a mix of water, unrinsed soap, and deep shame. The line of waiting women stared. Elara had to walk the length of the shed past her comrades to reach her clothes. Some looked away in pity. Others, hardened by months of captivity, snickered, a low, cruel sound that stung more than the cold water. They saw a woman who had tried too hard, who had dared to hope for too much. Elara kept her eyes fixed on the concrete floor, feeling every critical gaze burn into her half-rinsed skin. Here, a quiet voice broke the silence. Hannah, a tough-looking woman known for running the camp's small black market, stepped out of line. Hannah had a hard reputation. She never shared, never showed weakness. Yet she walked up to Elara, pulling a small, nearly full canteen from her pocket. She didn't offer a hug or sympathy. She simply pressed the cool metal flask into Elara's hand. "Rinse your eyes. It's better than nothing." Elara nodded, unable to speak. The unexpected kindness from a fellow prisoner was more effective than the cold water. She poured the small amount of fresh water over her burning eyes and sticky neck. Sergeant Miller, watching the entire exchange from the door, felt a heavy weight lift from his chest. He had been complicit in her humiliation, but the German woman's own humanity had redeemed the moment. Back in the main office, Miller wrote his report for Major Dietrich. He noted the shower schedule was completed on time. He blamed the water stoppage on external municipal failure. He filed the papers, clean and concise lies that protected his career and the camp's reputation. But the image of Elara, shivering and covered in soap, was a stain his pen couldn't erase. He had protected the protocol, but he had shredded her dignity. He knew a formal report wouldn't fix the chemical burn on her skin or the humiliation in her eyes. That evening, Miller made a covert trip to the quartermaster's supply. He was in charge of distributing prisoner rations, but he knew where the guards' personal supplies were kept. He quickly grabbed a new bar of high-quality, fragrant Allied soap, the kind that smelled of lavender, not lye. It was a forbidden luxury, worth weeks of his own cigarettes on the black market. He wrapped it in a clean, official medical bandage, a stark contrast to the rough gray material the prisoners wore. He needed to get the contraband to Elara. He couldn't go to her directly. Thompson's paranoia was contagious among the other guards. His chance came during the collection of dinner trays. Elara was assigned to the detail collecting the mess tins from Barrack 7. Miller positioned himself near the exit, overseeing the cleaning buckets. He watched her approach, noticing how she still moved stiffly, nursing her irritated skin. "Hurry up with that soap bucket," Miller ordered sternly. As Elara approached the bucket, Miller leaned down, obstructing the view of the nearby guard with his body. He kept his expression cold and professional. As Elara reached for the bucket handle, Miller quickly moved his hand, transferring the small wrapped bundle into her empty palm. The transfer was instant, less than a second. Their hands did not touch. The smooth, soft bandage of the contraband was all she felt. Elara froze, but her instincts saved her. She didn't react with surprise. She gripped the bucket handle, hiding the soft bundle instantly in the crease of her sleeve. She nodded once, a quick, almost imperceptible acknowledgement, and continued down the line. She didn't look back at Miller. The message was clear. There was no conversation, no thanks, no official recognition, just a secret shared between a man whose conscience demanded repayment and a woman who understood the high cost of such a gift. Back in the barracks, she carefully unwrapped the bandage. The rough paper contained a large, untouched bar of creamy white soap. The scent of lavender filled the stale air of the barracks, a scent of home, civilization, and care. Elara didn't use it immediately. She just held it, closing her eyes. It wasn't the soap that mattered. It was the fact that the enemy had seen her need, defied his own rules, and risked his safety to restore her dignity. The clean lie held for less than 24 hours. Major Dietrich was a man who trusted paperwork over people. He had the camp engineer check Miller's report. The municipal water log showed no external failure. The leak Miller reported on the main valve, non-existent. Dietrich called Miller into his pristine office. The major didn't shout. He just pointed a manicured finger at the report. "Sergeant, you lied. There was no water failure. Now tell me why the shower schedule was delayed." Miller knew the game was lost. Admitting he risked the schedule for a prisoner's dignity meant court-martial. He stuck to his original story. "The valve was sticky, sir. I had to personally ensure it was fully closed. I was not wasting time. I was ensuring efficiency. It was a poor defense." Dietrich rose, walking to the window overlooking the barracks. "The shower took too long, Miller. Was one of the prisoners attempting to hoard water? Did one of them cause a disturbance?" Dietrich had a witness. He had discreetly called the prisoner, who was next in line after Elara, a young, nervous woman named Greta. Greta was brought to the edge of the commandant's administrative area. Her testimony would either confirm Miller's lie about the valve or expose Elara's desperate plea. Elara's friend Hannah, the one who gave her the canteen, saw Greta being led away and immediately knew the danger. Hannah was a black market survivor. She was not sentimental, but she valued loyalty. She intercepted Greta just before the meeting. "Listen," Hannah hissed, her voice low and menacing. "They will ask why the shower stopped. You will say you heard Miller struggling with the main valve and you heard the next prisoner complain it was too hot. You saw nothing else. If you tell them you saw Elara covered in soap and begging, they will punish all of us for wasting water. Your choice." Greta nodded, eyes wide with fear. Greta's controlled testimony saved Miller's life. She confirmed Miller's struggle with the sticky valve and the subsequent scalding water, which accounted for the delay. Dietrich was left with no concrete evidence of misconduct, only a suspicion of incompetence. He dismissed Miller with a cold warning. As Miller walked out defeated but safe, Elara and Hannah were passing by, returning from a work detail. Elara stopped, pretending to adjust her shoe. She looked directly at Miller, who had seen the whole exchange. She knew he had risked his career for her. She knew he had given her the forbidden soap. Now she was giving him something far more valuable, her silence, enforced by her comrade. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't break her prisoner's mask, but she slowly, deliberately, raised the hand that had held the soap and gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible salute, an honor given from one soldier to another, enemy or not. Then she dropped her hand and kept walking. Sergeant Miller never returned to the Barrack 7 detail. The next morning, citing efficiency, Major Dietrich transferred Miller to the motor pool. Dietrich knew Miller was lying, but thanks to the POW's coordinated defense, he couldn't prove it. Miller felt intense relief, but also a strange sense of loss. He walked the perimeter of the motor pool, unable to shake the memory of Elara's tiny, perfect salute. He had almost thrown away his career for her, and she had repaid him with the one thing a soldier values most: honor. That evening, Elara took her chance. She waited until the guards had finished their rounds. She went back to the washroom with Hannah. There was no water pressure, but there were large metal basins for washing clothes. Using the meager shared basin water, Elara unwrapped the gift. The clean white bar of lavender soap filled the dank washroom with a glorious, impossible scent. It wasn't the aggressive chemical smell of the camp soap, it was the scent of forgotten home and the memory of her own mother's linen closet. He risked everything for this, Hannah whispered, understanding. Elara didn't deny it. She slowly lathered the soap, feeling the smooth, rich foam on her skin. She didn't rush. She washed her hair thoroughly, meticulously scrubbing the chemical burn and the shame away. The bar of soap was an artifact of kindness, a reminder that the enemy wasn't monolithic. She didn't use all of it. She knew its symbolic power was greater than its cleansing power. She put the rest away, guarding it fiercely. Miller was shipped back to the U.S. 6 months later. He was honorably discharged and went back to his life. He rarely spoke of the war, but whenever he walked into a pharmacy, he would always stop and pick up a bar of lavender soap. He would hold it to his nose, and the faint sweet scent would transport him back to a freezing, dusty camp, where a desperate German woman had given him the salute of a comrade. It was his proof that humanity could survive the coldest protocols. Elara was eventually released. She opened her own small textile shop, focusing on weaving and embroidery, art that required patience and clean hands. She taught her daughter that the ultimate gift is not wealth, but the dignity one restores to another. And she always kept a small, smooth piece of white soap tucked into her sewing basket, a relic of an enemy's conscience. The harsh 1-minute shower was forgotten. But the act of giving that bar of soap, and the tiny salute of recognition that followed, became the true victory of that conflict. It proved that sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is an exchange of dignity, not fire.